Hello and welcome to a new part in the Retopology Master series. In this video, I'll take a look at how you can use Booleans in a very basic way and work with Retopology. I'd like to thank Autodesk for sponsoring this series of videos and helping me, supporting my channel, and helping deliver more great content for you guys. If you want to get any Autodesk products such as 3ds Max, Maya, Fusion 360, SolidWorks, please use the link in the description. Alright, so in future videos we'll cover more advanced Boolean operations, but let's get started with some basic Booleans. The first thing I want to show you is how you can create a multi-object. That is, an object has multiple uses just by changing a few modifiers. So what I would do is just create a box right here, and I would just give it the same length and width. Let's just say something like 50, and the height of, let's say, 25. Alright, so maybe let's increase the height actually to 50 as well. Alright, so now what I can do is apply Retopology, and I can, let's say, select the top or bottom here, depending if we're going to do a union or subtraction. Let's start with the bottom, and I can, for example, scale it. Alright, and so what I can do is actually right click on Retopology and rename this to, let's say, bottom scale. Alright, now what I can do is turn this off and create a new Retopology modifier, and for this one what I can do is, let's say, move it out. Alright, and I can right click on this, rename it, and call it longer. Alright. I can apply new Retopology modifier, and I can select, let's say, the top, move this out to get these kinds of Boolean shapes in here. And I can, for example, rename this to angle, because of how we get this angle. Alright, so now what we can do is, as we move this around to Boolean, we can simply turn these modifiers on and off to get different types of effects. So essentially we've got like a multi-object, a omni-object here. What we can also do is apply a chamfer modifier. Alright, I'm going to increase the segments, because remember, when using Retopology, you want to have more segments. So we can have, for example, 5. So I can rename this to chamfer 5. Alright, I can copy this and paste it right on top. And I can give this, let's say, 10. Turn off the first one. And we can rename this to chamfer 10. Alright, turn this off, paste another one. And then let's try 15. Actually 15 for the amount. Alright, so I'm just making sure it's not too big, because if it gets too large, it will start to overlap on itself like that. Alright, so here we have 15. So just like that, we now have this multi-object. We can do, for example, bottom scale, chamfer 5, chamfer 10. Probably not 15, because that would be too much. And let's rename this as well. So chamfer 15, let's just make sure we got all the right settings. 5, 10, 15. Alright, we can do longer, chamfer 5, chamfer 10, chamfer 15. Angle, same things here. Now let's say we want to have an angle, but we don't want everything to be smooth here. We want it to be a hard edge here. So what we can do is actually copy this and paste it. And for this one, we can go into edge and chamfer this. So we can have this kind of chamfer and still keep this sharp, for example. So we'll have, for example, 525. So I'll call this angle 5. And for this one, let's say 1525. So I'll call this angle 15. Then we'll have 25, 25. So I can call this angle 25. Alright, so now we can even have different angles happening here, which will allow us a lot more Boolean options. So you can keep going. So essentially what you've got here is just this nice object which you can just change very quickly and get also different results. You can even combine them together. For example, if we have bottom scale, we can then put an angle on here like this. We can also add longer, for example. And we can even add the chamfers as well. So this is one of the reasons I really like using 3ds Max, is because I can combine different modifiers together here to get kind of this nice modular workflow and get all those different results here. Alright, so now that we've got that, let's show you how you can do the default Boolean. So let's Boolean something. Let's go ahead and create, let's say, a sphere. It's a nice object to test things out on. Alright, once again, the sphere is a little bit too angular. I'm going to make sure it's at 0, and I'm going to go ahead and move the Boolean object away. So let's select the sphere and actually start with a greater number of segments here. Let's just go to the full 200. Alright, so the default method, let me just also create a copy of this just in case. Actually, one more thing we can get here is that if I apply turbo smooth with, let's say, smoothing groups, what I can do is copy the longer and paste it right here. So don't worry about this warning. As long as you don't get too complex here, it will work just fine. But if you, for example, on one Retopology modifier, insert a bunch of topology and loops, and on the second one you extrude, that will give you problems. But as long as you keep it simple like this, it'll work just fine. So I've renamed this to longer capsule, because what I can do now is just insert some loops here, just for better subdivision. And now I can apply turbo smooth on top, the smoothing groups option. And actually, one more thing I want to do here is change the smoothing groups. So I will give this all the same smoothing group. What this will do is give us this kind of capsule effect. And one thing we can even do is just, for example, select this and give ourselves this kind of longer capsule. We'll insert 2 more loops. What that will do is, if you notice, it's kind of more an oval here, but if we insert 2 more loops, what I hope to do is just kind of flatten out this area. What we can even do is apply symmetry on top. Actually, let's apply symmetry right here. And so we can go into the mirror and we can give ourselves these kinds of long capsules or these kinds of shorter capsules here, which are very nice for sci-fi details. I'll also make sure this is at 0 on the x-axis. Alright, so let's start with our first detail, which I think it will be a large chamfer and maybe an angle here. There we go. We can even scale on the x-axis as well. So let's say that we've got this. Alright, so default way is that you can go into the compound objects and then use either Pro Boolean or Boolean. I like to use Pro Boolean. You can also set to a hotkey, so go into Customize Hotkey Editor. Alright, so I've got that set to Alt-V, so as you can see, Pro Boolean compound object Alt-V. Alright, so pretty much I would just select this and press Alt-V, and now it's Pro Boolean. I can set it to be, if I use move, it's going to disappear this object. It's going to be absorbed into there. Control Z. I can switch, for example, to copy, in which case it will be copied, and I can remove it, rotate and scale it. Reselect the object and then pick again. So as you can see, we start to get some interesting designs happening here. Obviously, I don't quite like this, so I'm going to move this to subtract it from here as well. Let's change some of the settings here. Let's get rid of the chamfer, and let's change the angle here. Alright, so we've got subtraction, we've got intersection. So for example, let's say you wanted to split this object up into 2 other objects. So what I would do in this case, the default way, is I would move it where I want it to occur, using things like scale, and I would just kind of, you can press Alt-X to make things transparent, you can also press F3, just to go into this kind of wireframe mode. It can be useful sometimes. Alright, so I'm going to decide where I want the separation to take place. Once again, you can see how I'm using the angle here and the chamfer to set it up. Alright. So for one object, I'm going to start picking and subtract. It's going to subtract that. Now what I would do is I will press Control V to copy this, not instance. And for this one, I'm going to select the latest operation, number 4, switch to intersection, and then change operation. So now this one is the result of intersection, this is subtraction, and as you can see, we've now split up into two objects. We can give this a different object color just to separate it. And give the bottom one a nice dark, this saturated blue, for example. Alright, if I want to check the side, I can move that as well. Oh, let's be sure to change it to subtraction. Now I've got this. To get the other side, we can just apply symmetry on top. By default, it goes from right to left to get this. Alright, we can create another object on top. What you can do is you can go ahead and use cylinder with auto grid on. Alright, let's be sure to increase number of sides. I'm going to go with 48 here. Alright, and actually we do want it to be, actually in this situation, let's go here. I'm going to press Alt V, reactivate Pro Boolean, and I'm going to subtract from here. This time, when I apply symmetry, I'm going to activate the flip option. It's going to go from left to right. Alright, you can use this tool, select in place. You can left click on your original object and then left click and hold, and it's going to kind of go over the surface of this other object. You can switch this to be local. Then you can move on the local axis here, and you can kind of scale in there and get it where you want it. Once again, press F3, alright, and then let's go back to Pro Boolean and subtract that as well. You can also go ahead and set it to be instance, start picking. What this allows you to do, so when you first use this option, make sure the object is intersecting a little bit, at least a little bit, and what I can do is move this, switch to rotate, and just right click here to bring it back to the original values, rotation values. So now what I can do is apply a poly on this, for example, and as I work with this object, it's going to apply here as well because it's now instanced. So I found this a very good method because you can work with this object in this very clean rotation off to the side. It's not rotated at a strange angle, which makes things more difficult. And we can actually see the results on our final Boolean object. So we can get this kind of modular interactive result. You can see how you can really get some really nice results going very quickly using instance. But of course, if you have a huge amount of instance objects, things will slow down. So at this point, you can just kind of reapply Pro Boolean to speed things up again. Alright, so sometimes after using Boolean, you will get some Boolean groups issues. So if you want to use Retopology with Boolean groups, you will have to fix some of those up. You can either use the smooth modifier, or you can just apply a poly and fix them just by selecting it. So for example, by angle, that's too much. So for example, I can select this. First I want to see what this is. This is within a group of 2, so I'll select this right here and also clear all and then 2. You can see how that within group issue has now been fixed. If you don't fix this, you'll get a bad result with Retopology because it will try and look at this as if it's smooth because there's no difference in smoothing groups. But now it will see that as sharp. So in order to do this fast, you can just use a smooth modifier, but in some situations, when you have very, very slight angles happening here, you can go in here and do a little bit of manual work here, because if I try and apply smooth and then auto smooth, you can see it will try and smooth this out because there's not a huge angle here. So if I make this too low to fix that, it's going to end up applying difference within groups everywhere. So now it's going to make all of this separate within groups as well. So it's going to retopologize with a very faster effect here. So in this situation, because of the very slight difference in angles here, we have to go in and pretty much manually do it using a very small bi-angle value. So with bi-angle off, we'll have to do this. But if we use bi-angle with a very small value, we can just select the very correct polygons we need right here. So now we're just going to subdivide. I'll use the default subdivide right here. And we can just apply slice to delete the left or right half. Alright. Now we're ready for retopology. Oh, looks like there's something happening on the bottom as well. Alright, there we go. Just kind of go over here, make sure it's looking good here in these areas as well. So I will just use the default values. Let's make a copy of this just so we can compare. What I can do is go back to subdivide and use variable curvature instead, which will take a little bit more time to subdivide, but it will give us better retopology results. Alright, now we can compare the retopology with the different subdivide mode to the previous one. And we can see that, especially right here, using variable curvature gives us much better results around this area. So you can see right here the topology is getting kind of very thin here. We can take a look. Kind of got this thing happening here, then it kind of just stops right here. So kind of a bad result happening here, but on the newer one, we get a much better result around here. We get this kind of loop going around here. Now keep in mind that sometimes when you use Booleans, you can get a bad result with the Booleans because of, for example, if I just turn off all these modifiers, go back to Pro Boolean, you can see what we've got happening here is because of the Boolean, we've got this kind of slight sliver happening right here, which can give you bad results. So when you're doing Boolean, kind of move your vertices a little bit to kind of get rid of this result. And maybe this right here, for example, could be a bad thing we want to get rid of, and that just depends on how the Boolean is positioned, for example. So because this one has this kind of chamfer detail, depending on how you rotate it, it could produce kind of a small little sliver of detail. That could just give retopology some trouble right here. So you would just want to move this object, this detail a little bit to get rid of that. Move it, for example, a little bit higher. Alright, so remember when you're doing retopology, the smaller the detail, the more density you need. So I could go back in here and try and decrease this, but that would give problems for this smaller detail right here. So for example, if we did not have this smaller detail, we could easily go much lower. But if we do have this small detail, we need to make sure we have a good amount, high enough face count to be able to capture this properly. So after we've got that, it's a good idea just to collapse it and then apply symmetry and flip it. And there we go. We've got a remeshed object right here ready for further modeling or unwrapping and texturing. We can also remesh this object as well, which will be much faster because it's simpler here. So for this situation, I'm going to use smooth, auto smooth, that'll fix this up. And then just subdivide and then just retopology. So for this one, we can go much lower. So I'm just going to apply another retopology modifier here. And let's go with maybe even 500, I think could work. So it's important to realize that for small details, you need more density. For more simple objects, you can go with a much lower amount. So even though before render time, it looks like these objects don't go very well together, once you, of course, crease it, they will go together much better here. So as you can see, using Booleans, you get these really nice slick shapes. Look at this nice transition that we have happening right here, for example. And it's ready for more modeling. So for example, we can just select some of this, a little bit of a extrude, moving a little bit here. So I will have to crease this, but it's very fun to add little extra details. Alright, thank you for watching and take care.